Hello class, today I'm going to go over some installation skills. We're going to be installing a framed print and a painting, but I want to stress that this skill set that I'm going to go over also applies to a lot of different kinds of installation, particularly if you are a video artist and you need to install a projector into the ceiling or a monitor onto the wall, or if you make sculpture that goes on the wall that hangs on a French cleat or something like that. This is actually a good beginning skill set to know how to install shows. I think a lot of you will also go on to be exhibition professionals. You might run your own gallery because apartment galleries are really common here in Chicago. Or you may become an art handler or a preparator for a museum, which is really good work to get when you're right out of school. So these are good skills to have no matter what kind of art you make. So let's get started. So you may notice in this photo, this is sort of the last shot afterwards, after installing the work. You may notice that these two pieces share the same center. So the measurements that I'm going to do in the coming steps will help you determine how to make pieces share the same center by doing a little bit of math. And then it's a little more advanced, so I'll circle back around to it after showing you how to install the pieces as to how to make the three margins that you see on the left, the right, and in between the pieces the same distance as well. It's a little trickier, so we'll do it at the end. Your pieces can be whatever height that you want. You can choose that based on your installation taste. I actually think it's kind of becoming more popular for hangings to hang a little low but there's if it doesn't matter, you can always choose 60 inches for the center of your work because this is kind of a museum standard. Some people use 58. For me, 60 is just a little easier to remember. That's what museums hang pieces at in a sort of standard setting because it's 58 to 60 inches is kind of the average eyeball height, so to speak. So the first thing you'll do is make a mark on the wall at 60 inches. So we're going to take a look at the back of this lovely painting by Wesley Weaver from my collection. And it's hanging, it has D-rings, as you can see. And so here's an example of a D-ring. They come in different sizes with 1, 2, or even 3 holes to install with a small screw, like a 1/2-inch screw, into the back of the stretcher bars. You'll do yourself a big favor by installing them the exact same length from the top. And I like to put them in at an angle, as you can see here, because then the hardware on the wall rests behind the stretcher bars, and you won't see it and it'll hang flat against the wall. So in order to hang our painting so that the center is exactly at 60 inches, we need to find this distance indicated in green. To find that distance, we're going to divide the painting in half and then subtract the area from the top to the D-rings. And then the remaining area is what we're going to add to 60 so that the center is exactly at 60. I'm going to repeat that again because it's a little tricky. So we're going to divide it in half, subtract above the D-rings, and then add the green area to 60. And then the center of the piece will be exactly at 60. So I'm going to find that dot I made at 60 and then use a level with a ruler on it to measure up 4.5 inches, which happens to be the green distance on this particular painting. It's actually surprisingly hard to find levels with rulers, but they'll really, really save you a lot of trouble if you can find one. If you can't find one, a regular level without a ruler and a tape measure will also work. Now that I know the height that my wall hardware will go, I need to find out the distance between them. So I'm going to measure the distance between the D-rings on the back of the piece. Not the width of the painting itself, but the distance between the D-rings. So notice here I'm hooking the tape measure into the D-ring and pulling it across and then measuring to the other side. And you'll see here it's 26.5 inches. So if I know where the edge of my piece is going to be, I'm going to use my level with a ruler to make two dots exactly level from each other, 26.5 inches apart. I'm going to hang them on what's called a floreat hook. You can get these at Home Depot or any hardware store. They come with little nails that have these grooved heads at the end so that they're easy to pull out. And in theory, one nail will hold 25 pounds. I wouldn't put that to the test, but according to that theory, if I hang my painting with two hooks with two nails, it would hang 100 pounds. I wouldn't put that to the test, but it just goes to show you how strong they are. D-rings are made to go into drywall. As I put it in, you'll see that the nails go in at an angle. This holds the drywall from the back. Drywall is very brittle, so a screw is likely to pull out of drywall, but with the nails going in at an angle, they hold onto the drywall from the back and can support a lot of weight, even though the drywall is brittle. I'm putting in my second floreat here now on the dot that I measured out, and you'll see I'm putting it in at an angle. This is for the same reason that I put the D-rings on the back of the painting in at an angle, so you can't see the hardware from the side. This isn't a rule, you don't have to do it this way, but it's sort of my preferred method. Here you see my hooks on the wall. I'm going to pick up the painting. Normally I use gloves for this, but I'm under quarantine and don't have any and can't go out and get any, so you just put them right on the floreats and then check it with a level. And then if you're slightly off level, here's a little trade secret for you that art handlers probably don't want you to know. You can put one or even two D-rings onto the lower side and it'll bump it up just a little bit and probably help you level it off a bit. So if you're not a painter and you don't work with D-rings, this is the part for you. I'm going to show you how you can use screws into drywall. Remember I said drywall is too brittle to hold screws? There's a specific way using anchors that you can do it. Someone in the capstone class asked me how to hang into the ceiling. You would use this method, and I'm going to kill two birds with one stone by also showing you how to hang a piece that is on wire. So here we have a print by Olivia Valentine, which as you can see is on wire. We have to do the same process we did with the other painting by finding the green zone in that diagram, if you remember it. But it's going to be a lot trickier this time because that distance could change depending on how loose or how floppy the wire is. Hanging on wire is a little tricky, but I'll show you a quick and easy way to do it. So here we have what's called a torpedo level. You can see my table isn't level, but we're going to need this for installing with wire. All torpedo levels are 9 inches wide, and almost all of them have a channel, as you can see here. This is specifically made to hang things with wire. If we rest the wire within that channel and hold it up so that the wire is totally taut and so that the level itself is even, then we'll know exactly where to put our hooks if we put them 9 inches apart. Knowing exactly where our hooks are going to be allows us to make that measurement that we need from this image, if you recall. And in this case, it's 5 inches. So we'll take 5 inches off of half of the height of the piece. And then we will add that to 60. It's hard to see, but I have a dot here at 60, and I'm going to use my level with a ruler to go straight up 5 inches. And then on either side of that dot, I'm going to put 2 dots where my hooks go, 9 inches apart. Remember, the torpedo level is always 9 inches wide. So there's all kinds of hooks that go with screws. This kind doesn't have a particular name. It's just a steel hook, and I get it from MCMASTER-CARR. And they have pretty much all kinds of hardware you could possibly imagine. These are good for hanging something that you think might be too heavy for a floreat. The screw is going to go into one of these. It's called an anchor, or sometimes more traditionally called a molly. And what they do is when the screw goes into them, they expand like this, and they will hold a lot of weight, even into drywall, even into a ceiling. So you can use these in ceilings with an what's called an eyelet, which is like a screw with a circle of metal at the end, and they will hold a ton of weight. Anchors are really only necessary into drywall. If a wall is, for instance, backed with plywood, the way a lot of walls at the Sullivan galleries are, you can just go straight in with a screw. That's also the case if there's a wooden stud in the wall. I'm using my hook to make a little mark right here because the place where the hook holds the wire and the place where the screw goes in aren't the same. So then I'm going to get a 1/4 inch drill bit, 3/8 also works, and drill a hole into those marks on either side. Like so. Next, I'm going to hammer in my anchor. And I'm finding out that I didn't drill a hole big enough, which is totally fine. What I'm going to do instead is get my drill again. I'm going to do what's called reaming the hole out, which is taking the drill and making a small circular motion as I drill in to make more of a beveled hole. And so watch when I try to hammer the anchor in now. It goes right in and I just tap it in, but it's still tight. Like so. And so then I drill my screw with the hook on it right into the anchor and straighten it out. And you know, this is the exact process you would use, for instance, if you're hanging a wall sculpture on a cleat. You would do this exact same thing. You just wouldn't use the hooks. You would just screw in the cleat into an anchor like this. And they, like I said, will hold a lot of weight. And then next I'm going to lift up the print and get a little bit of help holding it up while I reach behind and put the wire onto the 2 hooks. Again, better to use gloves, but I don't happen to have any and can't go get any. So then you sort of scoot it back and forth left to right until it's level, which we can see now that it is right here. So obviously these anchors are meant to stay put, so they're a little hard to get rid of. You may find, as I am right now, that they are a little bit tricky to remove with pliers, especially because I did a good job getting them tight into the wall. So a little trick you can do is get your drill again and drill them out like so. And then get your pliers and pull them out. And they should come right out like that. And they leave these nasty holes in the wall, and I'll show you how to patch those and be a really good steward of the gallery that you're showing in. Honestly, this is an extremely important skill, and very few people do it correctly, much to the dismay of people who run galleries like me. First, as you just saw, I sanded them down, and then we get some spackle and lay as thin a layer across it as I can manage while still covering the whole hole. You can see there's like maybe a little speck left over there. Once it dries, I can go over it again, but the idea is you keep going back and forth until it is as thin as possible without leaving any gaps. They make spackle that is pink and then turns white when it dries, which takes a few hours. So here we go. Now it's dry. So once it's dry, you just sand it over until the wall is smooth to the touch. So just keep sanding, sanding, sanding. And if you left a thin layer, it won't require very much sanding at all. Hopefully the gallery will have a little bit of the exact same paint that the wall is painted with, and then you simply go over it with a roller until it's nice and even. So here is our finished room, and as I mentioned at the top of the video, I'm going to discuss how to get equal space in between them. Of course, this is the first thing you would do, but for the sake of building more difficult skills on each other, I'm going to talk about it last because it builds on the kind of thinking we have already discussed in the video. First, you're going to measure the widths of each piece, add them together, and write that number down. Then you're going to measure the width of the room and write that number down. You'll notice also that we have 3 gaps. So here is your equation. Subtract the total widths of all the pieces from the width of the room. And then divide by the number of gaps, which in this case is 3, and that will give you the gap width. So if that's not tricky enough, you also have to take into account that the hardware you put on the wall has to match the hardware on the back of your piece. So you'll have to go in a little bit depending on where that is. In the case of the Wesley Weaver painting we've been working with, the D-rings are, as you can see here, 1 3/4 inches in from the edge of the painting. So you'll have to add that to the gap width. So in less than 20 minutes, that was most of the installation skills you'll need to know. If you have particular installation questions, especially if they are specific to a piece you have, feel free to email me, dfloyd@saic.edu, and I'm happy to help. I'm going to do a bonus video after this that is how to install works on paper that aren't framed, which is optional, but if you make work like that, I think it would be really helpful. Thank you so much.